And this marvellous concert continues from Philadelphia over on BBC One in just a moment. Tomorrow, the two Ronnies come to BBC Two.
A dramatic incident took place at the home of Sir Hugo Milverton in Weybridge. What was it?
He was found lying on his study floor. He'd been poisoned, he'd been strangled, he'd been shot 5 times through the head and stabbed 15 times in the back.
Correct. And what was the conclusion of the police?
He was dead.
I knew a gal called Droopy Drawers. Her ears stuck out like taxi doors. Tall as a pole and thin as a candle. Hard to please, but easy to handle.
You like women, don't you, eh?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just give me pipe, the great outdoors, and a beautiful girl, and you can keep the pipe the great outdoors.
The two Ronnies coming to BBC Two tomorrow at 9. In 60 minutes on 2, highlights of the day's play in the first Test match. First, Russell Davies presides over our Saturday review of the arts and media.
Who's making the headlines on Soviet TV? Who is Professor Kingsfield and what was he doing in London? What would you do with a water tower in Bermondsey? Who's writing the best books for babies? Prize-winning authors from the infantile market later in the programme, along with architectural redevelopment by the Thames, the cartoon strips of Jules Feifer brought to life, the amazing career of actor, producer, autobiographer and advertiser John Houseman, and a discussion of so-called news values from around the world, with evidence taken from last Monday's bulletins. First, with apologies to those of you still waiting for the sun to come out, something to celebrate the arrival of a kind of summer. There's nothing nicer than a summer garden, unless it's a bigger summer garden, with perhaps a gentle slope to it and a stream running down, and the odd sculpture dotted around. That was what was offered for public view last year on the outskirts of Oxford, where Joan Crossley Holland and the Oxford Gallery organised an exhibition of sculpture in a garden. This year, it's happened again. Most of the pieces are intimately fitted into this particular garden, yet the event is recognisably an exhibition. The house is High Wall, Headington Hill, Oxford, with its garden designed by Harold Ainsworth Peto. Some of the exhibits involve the water that seems natural to this environment, especially this summer. Others, like this heavy bronze by Elizabeth Frink, impose an almost ceremonial atmosphere. Most of the work on show is in some form or other for sale, which means, frustratingly, that highly desirable garden furniture commands art world prices.
Is it really bad? It's really comfortable.
I read that you don't necessarily claim the status of art for this particular piece. Is that because the problems involved are mainly scientific to get it working like this?
Well, no, I mean, art with a big A. You know, I don't necessarily see it as I see the other pieces which I've got in here. It's more in a sort of design field.
So ideally, would you like to see the sort of plumbing element hidden away and just the spouts coming?
Well, no, I quite like the patinated copper, but and I've left it overtly clear that I've used plumbing fittings. But I do feel this is just the basic skeleton for a design which could be integrated into a garden or into an architectural setting or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've just seen how it rises and falls. What is the mechanism that causes that to happen?
Well, it's simply a timer.
You have a curve on these columns of water coming out.
Yeah.
Tremendous trial and error must go into that.
Yes, it is. It's much more trial and error than mathematics. Some people credit me with a certain engineering skill, but it really is just trial and error.
Right. Well, thank you. Let's go and look at your brimming fountain then. Over there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we do that? Is that all right?
The thing that's immediately attractive about this is this tremendous meniscus brimming quality of the top of it. What made you think of that?
Well, I suppose what's intrigued me and excited me about water, one of the qualities is this still, absolutely still level quality that you get in deep lakes. And I really wanted to sort of emphasize that depth, that sense of stillness, and make a contrast with different types of water so that you have this very still deep water and then turbulent water as it slips over this weir.
It must be a matter of tremendously fine calculation just to is it a matter of hammering down this lip so that it just falls over the edge?
No, it's a matter of calculating the depth of that water, which in fact I got incorrect 2 or 3 times. I've had to slowly lower it down this shape. But what I did was to make it in 2 pieces and get it lower until I was surprised at how thick this layer of water has to be. In fact, it's over 1/4 of an inch all the way round.
Really?
Just to get that, yeah.
Yes.
Are there little holes in the
there?
central bit? Sorry? Are there holes in the central bit?
little holes in there?
Or does it all come over the top?
It's running down over the rough surface.
Yes,
It just
lovely.
pulls off the surface.
Yes, that's And
Very
when,
nice.
when there's a little tweaky bit, you see it looks
Yes.
this is a little.
Yes, it's very nice.
And this is very deep.
Yes.
Underneath this
And pull up, yes.
This piece, usually referred to by passing visitors as the rail, is actually entitled Suspended Reflection.
That's presumably where the double reflection is. Yes.
works off.
Yes.
Where the other one picks up.
Yes. No, it's very clever. Very, very nice.
Designed for that space.
Oh, in the middle, going out.
Yes, do you see?
Yes, I see. I was looking at the middle bit, coincided with the green.
Yes.
But no, that's very nice.
Pick it up again.
Mm.
Yes, do. Good.
Meanwhile, under the high wall itself, it's obviously a practical burner. Will it burn significant quantities of stuff?
I mean, it wouldn't burn a great deal. I mean, the idea is it's more of a kind of gesture in the garden. If you've got the odd casual bit of debris, you can pop it in this. So it's unlike the normal kind of garden burner, which is rather clumsy and the sort of thing you tuck around the corner. This is a decorative feature. Maybe, you know, at night you could illuminate it if you're having a party or something in the garden. So it's to act in that kind of way.
And the materials are what?
It's made out of cast concrete. It's limestone mixed aggregate. That gives it its white colour. And then it's an asbestos substitute on the inside and a kind of fireproof resin which makes this kind of edge around here. So,
Is this the site you always had in mind for it?
something similar to this, where you've got a vista where you see this at a distance in relation to a pyramid which is at the far side. On the pyramid there's a little sphere which is a kind of open version of this. So you would see them more like, if you looked at the sphere from a particular viewpoint, it kind of eclipses this. So you have an eclipse of this sphere from a distance.
Here's an example of the opposite tactic. Useful household-type materials being turned into something triumphantly impractical. I think I see a ball cock in there. Are all the components conventional plumbing bits?
They're essentially all plumbers' materials, yes. I think it's always good to have something that's discordant, because it makes you, it emphasises itself, but it also emphasises the beauty of the more pastoral garden. I like fountains that instead of just squirting water, actually do something, come alive. I suppose there's a bit of a professor brainstorming there.
Well, yes, I was going to say, is there a particular British tradition of this kind of machine?
Madness.
The world of news seemed very far away in that Oxford garden, but you can bet that inside the house was the inevitable TV, ready at the turn of a switch to bring news from any or all of the 5 continents, outer space, and even Rockall. I first became conscious of news in the era of BBC Wireless, when stern, almost military voices brought us a very civil service-style news that we seldom questioned. No doubt this was a hangover from the war, when you had to take whatever news you were given. Nowadays, news gathering is much more discussed in terms of style and the relative importance of stories, and it's to further that debate that I've been joined by 3 practicing news people. Kate Adie, one of the most roving of BBC reporters in recent times, Stuart Purvis, editor of Channel 4 News, currently Britain's biggest bulletin, and Edward Baer, the foreign correspondent, now working for Newsweek and based in Paris. We're going to take last Monday's news as the initial basis for discussion. Mark Brown, author, psychologist and barrister, has been sifting through it.
Surely, one of the greatest cliches of our time was that we are living in an ever-shrinking world, that advances in communications are drawing people from very different societies closer together. So, what about television news in different countries? Is it an impartial window on a single global village, or mere biased and nationalistic entertainment? What if we compared 5 countries' main news programs, say, for last Monday, the 8th of July? That's exactly what we've done. We've taken the news from America, Japan, India, the Soviet Union, and our own 6 o'clock news, which comes from this BBC studio. How similar were the worlds portrayed that day? How similar the implicit values? Let's start at the beginning.
Добрый вечер.
Здравствуйте, товарищи.
Good evening. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
こんばんは。
こんばんは。
東京都議会議員選挙。
A stirring theme and a firm hello in common. What else? Not much. In a day's events around the world, there was not one story common to the 5 broadcasts. The lead story of each country was different too. Let's look at those stories. The BBC News led with the story of a train disaster in northern France.
The wreckage from this morning's crash is still lining the railway tracks in the centre of this small Normandy town. The derailed coaches are lying a good 200 to 300 yards past the point of impact.
They followed with President Reagan's denunciation of what he described as states that sponsor terrorism. Not surprisingly, Reagan's speech was the American lead.
So the American people are not, I repeat, not going to tolerate intimidation, terror, and outright acts of war against this nation and its people. And we're especially not going to tolerate these attacks from outlaw states run by the strangest collection of misfits, Looney Tunes, and squalid criminals since the advent of the Third Reich.
Politicians also led the way on the Japanese news. The audience was given the results from the municipal elections, providing a lightning tour of the different parties' headquarters.
今回の選挙は首都東京での大型選挙ということで、各党とも国政選挙並みに力を入れましたけれども、際立った争点が見当たらなかったこともありまして、有権者の関心は盛り上がらず、投票率は史上最低となりました。こうした中で保守支持率の高まりを受けた自民党、固い支持基盤を持つ公明党、共産党が順調に議席を増やしたのに対して、不動票に頼る社会党、民社党などは議席を減らし、中でも初めて入社会党を前面に押し出して選挙戦に臨んだ社会党にとっては厳しい都民の審判となりました。
Lots of pictures for the lead so far. However, the India news starts off with a straight talking head. It's more like radio. But their decision seems influenced by the importance of the story rather than the availability of good pictures.
Talks between representatives of the Sri Lankan government and the 5 Tamil militant groups, along with the Tamil United Liberation Front, started in the Bhutanese capital of Thimphu this morning for finding a solution to the ethnic problem in Sri Lanka. These are the first ever negotiations between the Sri Lankan government and Tamil militant groups.
Soviet news led with the important internal issue of its harvest. The Soviet audience was shown efficient farming in Stavropol. This southern region being perhaps by no coincidence the party fiefdom where their leader Mikhail Gorbachev cut his political teeth. But don't be fooled into thinking that it's all record harvests and heroes of socialist labor, because there's bad news too. Just a few minutes into their bulletin, the Soviets are telling their claimed audience of 200 million about a series of bureaucratic blunders.
Мы это производим, мы стараемся, а наши труды, ну, как вам тут образно сказать, они идут на смарку. И нежелательно, конечно, чтобы так вот зарабатывала наша промышленность легкая.
Это необработанные запасы Починковского льняного завода Министерства текстильной промышленности РСФСР. Стоят на совхозных землях, а это без малого 40 гектаров пахотной земли, льняные скирды урожаев 2-, 3- и даже 4-летней давности. 1000 тонн. И за каждую совхозу выплачены большие деньги.
The question is, how aware are we of the values that create the content and structure of our news? This is the key issue because those values and subsequent news items create the world that lives in our heads. Just consider the hundreds upon hundreds of hours we spend watching the news. What global and moral perspective is painted onto people's minds? The Soviet news runs in a quite different order to the one we're used to. It is more clearly divided. In their case, their first half being home stories, followed by foreign news, then arts, and finally sport. In Western news, items can come in any order. Timeliness sometimes seems all-important. The Indian news, on the other hand, is very clearly an arm of government. Much of their programme was taken up by meetings of committees, the appointment of middle-ranking officials, and reports on the stream of visitors to Prime Minister Gandhi's residence.
A delegation of Arya Samaj women also called on the Prime Minister today. At a function in New Delhi this morning, the Prime Minister released a 5-volume set of a study on rural development. The study was made by Dr. R.P. Mishra, Vice-Chancellor of the Allahabad University.
Indian news rarely reports internal political rows. The Japanese just don't seem to have them. Take just one example of Japan's news values influencing a story's treatment. Every year, the government and the rice suppliers meet to fix the price of rice. It's a pretty critical and difficult negotiation, and we might think it ripe for conflict. Any Western news program probably couldn't resist exploiting the potential gulf between the negotiators. Yet the Japanese news avoids any sense of tension or irreconcilability. If the news ethos in Japan embodies constraint and self-control, what news value creates this?
Under the law, active-duty military personnel can't sue military hospitals or their doctors for medical malpractice, no matter how blatant the offense. In Dawn Lambert's case, Navy doctors left 2 sponges and a piece of green plastic inside her during a tubal pregnancy operation.
There's no excuse for it. I was only 20 years old. They could have saved my tube. I possibly could have children.
So, different values and norms make for what is and what is not news. And even if 2 countries manage to agree that a newsworthy event has happened, do their different ideologies really describe the same event? Take the Soviet and American coverage of the Mexican elections.
В избирательной кампании этого года участвовали 9 политических партий страны. Крупнейшая из них, Институционно-революционная партия, находится у власти уже более 50 лет. Ее лидеры выступают за независимый внешнеполитический курс Мексики, за право всех народов на свободу и независимость. С яростными нападками на эту программу выступает крайне правая партия национального действия, тесно связанная с крупной буржуазией, а также с монополистическими кругами США. Впервые в истории Мексики на нынешних выборах в едином союзе выступают левые силы страны.
So, a satisfactory outcome from their point of view, and for the Americans,
Feliz Valdez, the president's hand-picked candidate for governor of the state of Sonora, declared himself the winner an hour before the polls closed. Alberto Rosas, the challenger, says he would be the winner, but for dirty politics. If his party, PAN, has a platform, it is strategic martyrdom to gain support by convincing people a corrupt government stole their elections, even when the actual votes might not have been there.
So a Soviet's democratic process is an American's rigged election. And so, for the 8th of July, 1985, what geographical worlds were painted onto the minds of 342 million viewers? Britain, fairly Western-sighted, with an occasional glimpse into other people's worlds. America, interested in home and close by. Japan, hugely self-interested. India, much like Japan. the Soviet Union, interested in home, and also seeing some self-interest in scattered parts of the world. I said at the start that the only thing in common was the good evenings. Not quite true.
And that's the CBS Evening News for this Monday. Dan Rather reporting from New York. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Bulletin, good night.
Good night.
That's it. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
以上、今夜のヒーローニュースでした。では皆さんまた明日。
Well, Stuart, of us all, you're the one who makes final editorial selections about news bulletins. Did you recognise your Monday in that lot?
It was a funny old Monday. There were a multiplicity of lead stories even within British television news. There was, apart from the train crash on the BBC, there was the latest state of the Knots miners developments. There was the British gesture towards Argentina. There was President Reagan's speech, which led, I think, the 9 o'clock news and news at 10. I think the point is, it's inevitable that there will be a multiplicity of lead stories, not just in world news bulletins reflecting the different societies, the different interests, the different controls that government have. And had we taken a day when there was one lead story across the world, which I suspect would have been US hostages, I think what you'd have seen there was a totally set of different issues. You'd be asking us now, is it right that the American news programs dominate the coverage and therefore these pictures go around the world? You'd be asking us, is it right that they are managing the news, that the hostages are managing, that hostage coverage is managing the news, that Reagan is managing the news, all these kinds of issues. So that one day was a day when there was a multiplicity of leads, but taken a day when there'd been one single international story which had dominated the news programs, different issues would have arisen.
Were you at work on that day, Kate?
I brought a story in from South Lebanon, and therefore it was on, but it was a story which was one of many of the same sort of what we call size from a UK perception. It didn't worry me that there wasn't one story right across the board on everybody's news. In fact, I'd start worrying if there was one story. That would begin to say to me, well, it's a funny old world we live in, because if that is so, why isn't everything just pinned on one thing? Why isn't everybody's literature about one subject? Why isn't everybody's culture actually focusing around one particular movement in all parts of culture or the arts? I'd worry about that if it was one story, unless it is something, for example, like the US hostages, which very much affect a lot of countries in the world. Obviously, you get one story leading in the bulletins. I think one of the points that came out of that, though, which was something which would be dominating other bulletins we haven't seen, particularly third world nations bulletins, is what I would call ritual news. We saw it in the Indian one. You know, Rajiv Gandhi meets all these people, delegations come in, committees, various important people exchange fraternal greetings. This is very much the bulk of a lot of third world country newses, and we have it as well. We have ritual news, like sort of sightings of the Loch Ness Monster, who wins the Grand National, and Trooping the Colour. They're not news in themselves, they're diary events, but we put them in. They very much dominate in the third world, and a lot of the bigger stories we might put emphasis on get pushed aside for whom the president is seeing.
Yes, the court and social. Yes. Does all of this make you feel even more of a printed word man than you already are, Eddie?
Not really. I mean, the India thing is interesting because India is a country where the press is extraordinarily free, and yet they have this very, very rigid television concept. And I think looking at what we've just seen, it's a tremendous argument for competition on television. It's a tremendous plus point for, I would say, for commercial television, or at any rate for a kind of menu where people can choose, because if people could choose, they certainly wouldn't be watching the Soviet program that we saw. They certainly wouldn't be watching the Indian program, and I can think of 20 or 30 countries where the the kind of choice that you have is nil. I was in Iraq last year, and Iraq is unbelievable as far as television is concerned. It's a fairly rich country, but on any night of the week, all you will get is either religious mullahs ranting away, or President Saddam Hussein decorating his troops endlessly for hours at a time. And if this is television news, and that is what television news is about in Iraq, it's a very sad thing.
There are large chunks of the world now which are not exactly close to us, but are pretty near it, and there are a very large number of countries where, for example, Western television crews cannot get in except under certain circumstances. The Iran-Iraq War is the classic example. Actually getting there is a matter of the Iraq government on the Iraqi side actually deciding to take you for a visit. Yes. And there are many, many parts of the world where we do not cover because it's almost impossible to cover.
It's the crucial thing, I think, is when you cannot get the pictures, do you not cover the story because of that? And the fact is, if the Iraqis are sometimes more allowing people in than the Iranians, is that going to mean that Iraq gets more of a say? And I think the crucial thing to be done from this end, if you like it, the news editors making their decisions is, well, you know, should we not put something together on this item, otherwise it's not going to get covered, rather than be dictated by the pictures.
In the case of the BBC World Service, we do have something that feels a bit like a disinterested global news thing. It's quite different from our domestic bulletin. Is it worth trying something of that kind on TV, do you think?
Yes, but who is going to run it? This is the old conflict that UNESCO raised about the so-called imperialist nature of Western television. Watching what the Indians are doing, what the Russians are doing, I don't particularly have very much faith in a new world order of television in which they would have a significant input. It seems to me that it's inevitable that the relatively free television networks and BBC and things like Viz News, which are very present all over the world, should dominate the news coverage in 150 countries, because that's all there is, and that's all you're going to get, because if you're going to rely on the Iraqis to produce a documentary, a meaningful, objective a story about the war, you can wait a long time.
There's also the thought that if you put out something for worldwide consumption, as has been mentioned in the past few months on satellites, the new ideas that if you can get your little ball in the sky and your little dishes everywhere, that you're into the business of doing some sort of global programming. And it's already admitted by those people involved that any news service would have to be so bland to be acceptable everywhere. It would be virtually not news service. It would be the flax harvests, folks, you know, sort of trundling out from central Russia, possibly our coal production figures. It would be so much a matter of statistics and the ritual news that it wouldn't be of great interest even to those people, I think, who sit in and watch relatively what we consider boring news anyway.
Unless you had a kind of deliberately provocative direct satellite broadcasting network, which is something that the Americans are contemplating, which would be a kind of televised equivalent of Radio Free Europe, which, for one thing, most of Eastern Europe is hankering for. The Poles in particular say, when I was last in Poland recently, when are you going to do this?
I mean, there's one rather good example, is the Eurovision News Exchange. 3 times a day, the member countries of Eurovision exchange news pictures. It's a very clever system. It works technically very well, and they're just swapping news pictures. There are some people within Europe who would like to organise a pan-European news that goes out across the lot. And you have to say at that stage, everyone backs off and says, well, look, just let's keep swapping our pictures, but we don't want any one person or any one broadcaster making a European running order for us all to appreciate.
One of the things that's not common to everyone is the actual status that news has. I mean, we're grandly saying here, you know, the television news, and giving it a certain status, which I think we believe it has in this country and in America, where it's been a rising position over the past few years as people and the networks and the people who buy the dog food have been encouraged of the fact that news is a bit more entertainment-wise these days in the US, ever since the American hostages in Iran. News has gone up there to a certain status. Our news has a certain status. You go to people even in Europe and they say the news? It's a load of rubbish coming out from the government. In Europe, that is. That's sophisticated broadcasting systems. Most Italians of any education would not admit that they took their basic news from the television. No, they would go to the newspapers for it. The French have for a long time, and you know better than me.
Well, French television news coverage has, I think, improved markedly over the last 2 years.
But it had a rock bottom
It had a terrible status, particularly in Gaulle's days, when it was incredibly slanted.
It does not carry the sort of weight and the influence which we're talking about. It's just another bit of television.
And it certainly doesn't in Eastern Europe either, where people are deeply suspicious of everything that they see on television, and always have been. The only exception being the 15 months of solidarity, when people would stop each other in the street and say, did you see last night's television, bro? It contained news. And this was a surprise to people.
Edward Bear, Kate Adie, Stuart Purvis, thank you all very much. A man who's been reacting to TV news a lot longer than most of us is the American cartoonist Jules Feifer. In his early days, he combined the functions we expect today from Mel Kalman and Posey Simmons, a pained observation of the middle class, plus a well-developed Jewish anxiety neurosis. That was in the Eisenhower era, and inevitably the psychology of the Cold War drew Feifer into making political comments too. Now, in the Reagan era, he finds the same old gestures and atmospheres have come round again. His collection, Pfeiffer's America, was published here by Penguins 3 years ago, and it's this volume which has been selectively staged here in Britain and will be shortly exported to Broadway. Here's how it looks, with the emphasis on politics, the psyche, and television.
No one loves me.
I love you.
No one takes care of me.
I take care of you.
Nobody gives to me, they only take.
I give to you, I take nothing.
I have no friends.
Except me.
I can't go through life entirely dependent on television.
Could you survive without me?
Me. Me, 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 me. Me, 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 me,
I dug jazz, and Whitey picked up on it. I dug hip, and Whitey picked up on it. I dug rock, and Whitey picked up on it. I dug freedom, and finally lost Whitey.
I am loved. People need me, worship me, can't live without me, go crazy when I don't come across with what they want. I shape lives. I teach how to shoot, what to buy. I drain the emptiness from lives and fill the void with junk. People are grateful. I am the giver of news. Without me, opinions do not exist. I am the inside of your head. You wanted a gross national product? You got it.
A dance to the loss of innocence. In this dance, I have symbolized youth. Its hopes, its wishes, its dreams, its choice of friends, of lovers, of gods. Youth, bright and eager to search life for its meaning, certain in the knowledge that it will find that meaning. And then comes disillusion. The disappointment of friends, the inadequacy of lovers, the failure of gods, the gaining of bitter insights. There is no one who doesn't lie. There is nothing incorruptible. They're all chasing out to get you. Don't believe a single one of us. No good, dirty. Oh, forget it. I don't feel like dancing.
Sometimes, in the middle of a delicate negotiation, I get this thrill. And the thrill says, look at you. You are Kissinger. And you're sitting in a palace around a big table. And I answer the thrill with the voice of reason. I am a mere servant of the president. But the thrill goes on. Nah. You are Kissinger. You won the Nobel Prize. You get invited to all the top parties. You're a peer of Nelson Rockefeller. So once more, I answer the thrill with the voice of reason. I am but a small cog in a vast and complex machinery. The thrill comes right back. You survived Nixon. You will survive Ford. You are more famous than Mick Jagger. At which point, I'm interrupted by a question from the President of France, to which I must fake an answer. Because who listens?
My fellow audience, we are about to release Movie America. As the producer of Movie America, let me lay out the storyline for you. Boy gets girl. Girl gets marriage and a family. Father gets a new job and a tax cut. Mother gets a drop in grocery prices. Children pray and go to church socials. Business skyrockets, and Russia can't keep up with the arms race and unconditionally surrenders. Black and white, old and young, yellow and brown, all mend their differences and go to the prom. So watch for Movie America, coming soon to the White House. Thank you.
An American performance that might pass the Pfeiffer in mid-Atlantic on its way here is The Cradle Will Rock by Mark Blitzstein, a politico-musical drama from the 1930s. It was presented then by the producer and impresario John Houseman, who on opening night was faced with a union ban which prevented his casts from appearing on stage. Undaunted, they improvised the performance from the auditorium, among the audience, while Blitzstein, the composer, kept the musical continuity going on stage. The same John Houseman has directed the forthcoming performance, already much acclaimed in America. The players involved are the Acting Company, a young people's group which again is Houseman's own creation. He is altogether a remarkable man. You'll readily recognize him as Professor Kingsfield from The Paper Chase, which ended its BBC run last night. But Houseman only became an actor 10 years ago and promptly won an Oscar for his first feature role as Kingsfield. When he was in London recently, I asked Houseman about this, about his unrivaled circle of influential colleagues in theatre and films, and his beginnings in life as Jacques Houseman.
I've had 4 nationalities in my life. I am by birth, I suppose, a Romanian, though I never had a Romanian passport. But because my father was French, I traveled on a French passport until I was 18, 19, 20. Then one day the French sent me a little note saying they'd like me to join the army, and I didn't think that was a good idea, so I became, unfortunately, a deserter from the French army. So for 2 years I was a man without a country. I was a total pariah. But because I'd lived so many years in England, they said that as soon as I reached the age of 21, they would give me a naturalization. So when I was 21, I became a naturalized British citizen and remained that way until 43, when I became an American citizen.
You fell in with Orson Welles, a relationship that at first was highly productive at the highest level.
It lasted for 5.5, 6 years.
And then rather painful, and then eventually non-existent, really.
Non-existent, but, you know, like all theatrical partnerships, it doesn't survive beyond the exact circumstances that bring it about. And when Orson became a big figure in movies, the partnership no longer was valid, and so we split up.
Is there anything between you now? Do you acknowledge each other?
Our paths don't cross very often, but we're perfectly good friends. I mean, we would be very civil if we met.
Charles, I think I should remind you of a fact that you seem to have forgotten. Yes. That you are yourself one of the largest individual stockholders in the Public Transit Company.
The trouble is you don't realize you're talking to 2 people. As Charles Foster Kane, who owns 82,364 shares of Public Transit Preferred, you see, I do have a general idea of my holdings. I sympathize with you. Charles Foster Kane is a scoundrel. His paper should be run out of town. A committee should be formed to boycott him. You may, if you can form such a committee, put me down for a contribution of $1,000.
My time's
On the other hand, I am the publisher of the Inquirer. As such, it's my duty, and I'll let you in on a little secret. It's also my pleasure to see to it that decent, hard-working people in this community aren't robbed blind by a pack of money-mad pirates just because they haven't anybody to look after their interests.
Citizen Kane was Orson's picture. He made it, he produced it, he directed it, so even without resorting to the auteur theory, it was his movie. The fact is that the script was written by Herman Mankiewicz. I was there, and I mean, I've always testified to that. And it is an absolutely remarkable script. It's an extremely adult script. Mankiewicz had really been saving all this, his whole passion for American contemporary history, went into that, and I mean, the whole thing about Hearst, Herman didn't have to do any research. He knew all that, not just the scandalous part, but all the other part, how those newspapers were created, how they were run. He was very familiar with that, and the whole philosophy as expressed by Joe Cotton, that all it was Herman's, and you know, he should have credit for that. But the way it was used was Orson's.
Immediately before the Mercury Theatre was founded, you'd done The Cradle Will Rock. Now, how much of the style of that production, as we see it today, is owed to that remarkable premiere that you had?
That's all of it. All of it. I mean, Orson had directed it as a rather large-scale or quite elaborate musical. There were floats that came in and out with glass bottoms and lights coming up, and there was a 28-piece orchestra and a great deal of scenery. All of that was scrapped. And it's not only my opinion, but the general opinion today that the piece works better in its simplistic form than it did with all the trimmings.
Up on the topmost bough of yonder tree now, like bees in their hives, the lords and their lackeys and wives, a swinging rock-a-bye baby in a nice big cradle. Then they remark the air is chilly up there, the sky beetle browed, can that be a cloud over there? And then they put up their hands and feel stormy weather. A birdie ups and cries, boys, this looks bad. You haven't used your eyes, you'll wish you had. That's thunder, that's lightning, and it's gonna surround you. No wonder those storm birds seem to circle around you. Well, you can't climb down and you can't sit still. That's a storm that's gonna last until the final wind blows. And when the wind blows, the cradle will rock.
Were you at all put off the Brechtian end of theatrical practice by your eventual association with Brecht himself?
I mean, he was incredibly difficult to work with. He was unbelievably disagreeable, cruel, demanding, but he was always right. We did the world premiere of Galileo at my theater in Los Angeles, and although Joe Losi was the credited director, in fact, Brecht really did the whole thing.
You spent many years wrestling with the third floor, the movie moguls. Latterly, you've been making feature films again. Is there any great difference between American popular taste and the kind of intellectual, or at least literate tastes that you're dealing with in the theater?
I don't think so. I think, you know, one looks back on history and I think that generally popular art, of course, we are much more conscious of mass communication today than we ever were, but I think popular art probably has maintained a fairly steady ratio of anywhere from 15 to 20% of quality against 80% of junk. And I think that's true probably everywhere.
John Houseman for the investment firm of Smith Barney.
The New York Stock Exchange. Trading is over. Some tally their profits, some lick their wounds, and some still look for the ultimate financial formula. For over 100 years, Smith Barney has used only one investment formula, good old-fashioned hard work. Smith Barney. They make money the old-fashioned way. They earn it.
Do you enjoy the commercials? Is there something, are you giving something of yourself away which perhaps...
If they're good, yes. The Smith Barney ones, the financial house, I've been doing them for 4.5 years, and they are consistently well-written and quite amusing, and they're fun to do. And I do enjoy them, yes. You know, it's, I think there is a, it sounds pretentious, but I think there is a kind of an acting challenge. You are dealing with a certain audience and advertising a certain product, and this calls for certain adjustments as an actor to try and make that work. I mean, that it's not as complicated as doing King Lear, but because it's only 30 seconds. But I enjoy them, and God knows they are very lucrative.
You come across very forcefully in that commercial and in others, and in your performance as Professor Kingsfield in The Paper Chase. But you're by no means as ogreish in the flesh as you are on the screen. Why is that?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'd like to be ogreish in real life too. But no, I think the character of Kingsfield has a lot to do with these commercials. I don't think anybody in the world would have hired me to do a commercial. When Smith Barney decided to do commercials, they had an agency check on what the word is, credibility is the word they used technically. And they discovered, to their amazement, that next to Walter Cronkite, I had the highest credibility of any male performer in the country. And that, of course, is entirely due to Kingsfield, because Houseman is a sort of crooked producer who's been making ends meet for years, but nobody would believe a word he said. But Kingsfield is totally credible, so that my commercials are really in the person of Professor Kingsfield, not John Houseman.
You realize that you and your fellow students are on the verge of branding one of the most distinguished law professors in this country. Senility. You realize that it will cut to the very heart of his career and of his pride. And even if it's proved untrue, it'll be just as harmful as if it were true. Good day, Mr. Ford. Good day, Mr. Ford.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. John Houseman. The Cradle Will Rock opens at the Old Vic on August the 13th. From artistry in old age to books for babyhood. Everyone knows about books for toddlers, but I didn't realize that books for babies were a different thing, unless you count those plywood books that are only any good for making clapping noises and getting your finger trapped in. But no, the Book Marketing Council insists that there is a separate market involved here. And accordingly, Best Books for Babies Week is about to begin, with a prize for the outstanding publication given at a lunch at Stationers' Hall.
The first Best Books for Babies award will be presented to a title which is an already acknowledged classic. As a book for the very young, it has everything. A brilliant rhyming text which carries both parent and child along with its rhythm, the repetition young children love so much, warm and lovingly detailed pictures which children can pore over of a family sharing and enjoying life together, and an original device based on a favorite children's game to make the whole more than just a picture book.
The winning book is Peepo by Janet and Alan Arthur. I'm very sorry about your loss.
It's very pleasant to work for yourself, to have very few hindrances as to what you want to do, to work in your own way, in your own time, in your own place. I think we're very lucky. And to get pats on the back of the kind that we've had from time to time. And to have people buy the books, yes, it's very neat. I like it. Usually, most of the books we've done start with a text, and I produce the text. But right at the beginning, I take the text to Janet. Usually, I sort of push her breakfast aside and force her to read it. And if she likes it, I'm pretty cheerful. If she doesn't like it, I'm very ratty with her. But then she's my best editor. She ferrets out the fancy writing in the text or the weakness. So we collaborate on the text, and she's my editor. And then later on, we work on the pictures, and I'm hers. I lean over her shoulder and say, I don't like his nose, and we talk about type, and we talk about where the words are to go and where the pictures are to go and what the rhythm of the book is. I mean, because really what we are is bookmakers. I'm willing to sacrifice the text, and she's willing to sacrifice the pictures to the totality, the whole, which is the book from cover to cover. I suppose Pepo started with nothing at all. I mean, literally, it started with a hole. It was the notion that you could have a hole in a page and peep through and thereby anticipate what was going to happen later in the book. And then the word peeping led to Pepo and gave us the idea that this ought to be a book for babies. And then very gradually it developed into, in a way, a book about me, because the baby in the book is me growing up in a terrace house in the Midlands in the 40s, during the Second World War, in fact.
I did a lot of research on 40s things because I was a baby too and couldn't actually remember them, although I did live with my grandparents, and they had a lot of 30s and 40s stuff around when I was little. So I had a big fat book called the Army and Navy Stores Catalogue of 1939, which had a lot of 40s detail in it. So I was able to make sure I'd got the right sort of things around. Also, I feel a nostalgia for that time, even though I'm not really able to remember it.
But these prize winners do seem to cater more for veteran baby readers. The growth area is definitely the nappy group, and here the market leader is Helen Oxenbury.
I started the board books because of the new baby, and I tried to find books that would be suitable for her, and although there were a few, it was very limited. I thought that I would like to try a book for that age group, sort of 4-6 months, where the image is very, very simple, something that they are familiar with. And also, I think what is quite important is that the parent who is bound to be with the child looking at the book at that age is also quite amused or interested in the book.
Jack looks the sort of baby who's always got his nose in a book, though this is actually the first book he's seen. Jamie likes to get his teeth into a tougher form of narrative. Thomas may well end up as a book reviewer. For socks and sock men.
Shoes.
As anyone knows who lives next to a shopping centre or a multi-storey car park, or has seen Alec Clifton Taylor in action, there's a lot more to be gained by doing up something old than by sticking up something cheaply newfangled. This has certainly been the case for Andrew Wadsworth and Julie Barnforth, who commissioned the architect Piers Gough to design their home in what used to be a water tower next to Tower Bridge. He produced a typically quirky plan on 5 levels. Our guide is the orchidaceous architect himself.
The good thing about this tower is that although it's on 5 floors, one's able to come in at the middle floor, so that this entrance hall is right in the middle of the whole tower space. And you're immediately aware of it. It's a very vertical entrance hall, and you have a view down to the floor below, which is the billiards room. And this sweeping stair goes up to the upper floor, and you see a shaft of light coming right down towards you. You're very aware of what's going to happen next, which is you're going to walk up this and go and see, one can imagine, the fabulous view. The architectural conception is a kind of compressed grandeur, as if it was some shipping line's office or something like that. The chandelier and the mirrors and the marble stairs are obviously opulent. Of course, the stairs themselves, the main point of them is to lead up to the living room. The stairs, from this end, they're more like a companionway. They come up in the middle of the deck of the living area. This is the main living floor. And the idea is that, in fact, they divide the space into kitchen, dining room, and this area where we made these big windows. So this area is called the conservatory area, which is presided over by this Egyptian Statue of Liberty, and is for Lloyd looming about. Andrew and Julie had this marvelous collection of 1930s Lloyd loom furniture. So we knew that we were going to go for this effect of what is really like an old, rather grand hotel, slightly faded, sort of perhaps in Bexhill or somewhere, where one longs to go and stay, if only they really existed, which of course they don't. Now these columns are in fact radiators, and they're a standard kind of radiator when they're used the other way on. These are normally on the back, these ribs, and we decided to turn them inside out and make them curved and put the ribs on the therefore on the outside, and they make a perfect Doric, well, nearly Doric column. The brief for the kitchen was that that the clients didn't like kitchens, and not only that, they didn't want the kitchen to look like a kitchen. And so I thought that the best thing to do was to turn it into a piece of joke classical architecture. The reason is that I realized that rustication, which you find at the base of many Baroque buildings, is the ideal design for drawers. And so the whole idea really came out of that. And once I thought of that, it all seemed quite reasonable that, for instance, the fridge would be here, behind and under a broken pediment. Well, one of the problems with pretending a kitchen isn't a kitchen is what to do with the kitchen taps, and this gargoyle gives it all away. What we were trying to preserve here is not only the bricks, but also the terrific sense of space that you have in a building like this. When you first come, of course, each space was completely empty. And it seemed very important that the major spaces of the tower, the living area and the billiards room, were kept as big rooms, unencumbered. I think we talked a lot about the Grand Hotel, the faded Grand Hotel. Nobody wants to live in a Trust House Fort kind of modern-orama. But what we're thinking about is something like the Imperial Hotel Torquay, before it could afford to do itself up, before it could put in all the cheap laminates and crap that they do nowadays. Sandwiched between the billiards room and the upper floor living room is the master bedroom suite. Andrew had seen the dome that I did at the Lutyens exhibition and liked it very much. And also we had these arched windows, which was going to be in that room. And therefore that set up the idea of a dome for the bedroom. So the bedroom is this completely different. It's a totally transformed room. It bears no relation to what was there before. It's a complete invention, if you like. The other part of the living area is the sitting area, and that is upstairs on this balcony. Obviously, Andrew and Julie would be going up and down these stairs a lot, so they had to be made very easy rise, very gentle. The carpet, which is a gorgeous blue, was chosen to go with the bricks by Julie, and I think it works really very well. When you're up here, you sit down, and when you're sitting down, you have a much better view. Of course, up here, you're really up in amongst these arches, and right at the top of them, really, and they were already here. But the good thing is that by putting this circular window into the middle of the arch, we were able to make an eye-level view when you're sitting down. So it's the ideal sitting area, really. The climax of the whole design, and I suspect partly why Andrew and Julie really wanted this water tower, was that from the roof, which is in fact the old water tank, there is the most spectacular view all over London. And really no architect or designer or anything could do anything about that. I can neither make nor mar it. It is there, and it is perhaps the best thing about the whole tower.
As we leave you tonight, we drop in on a great open-air musical performance that is happening tonight in London. No, it's not the one you're escaping from on the other channel, but the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra under André Previn doing Handel's music for the Royal Fireworks in Hyde Park. It's been put on in commemoration of the 300th anniversary of Handel's birth, and you can see a fuller account of the evening's entertainment, complete with firework display, tomorrow night on BBC Two. Good night.
the royal fireworks and music of Handel tomorrow evening here on the UC2 at 8:05.